Welcome, beloved anointed ones. Sometimes, the devil doesn't flee because you shouted. He flees because you finally stopped answering the door. Let that sink in. Chosen ones, there's something you did recently, maybe without fanfare, without fireworks, without even realizing it, that just shifted your whole spiritual jurisdiction. You didn't announce it on social media. You didn't cry about it in group chats. You just did it. And heaven noticed. Now here's a fact most people overlook. Over 85% of negative outcomes in people's lives are not the result of bad luck, but repeated invitations to familiar chaos. What protects you isn't always a miracle. Sometimes it's a moment of clarity where you say, wait, I've seen this nonsense before. And just like that, you closed the loop. No dramatic exorcism, no holy water, just divine discernment with a side of fed up. Let's be real. Some of y'all didn't block the number to be petty. You blocked it because every time they call, your life starts unraveling like cheap thread from the dollar store. And guess what? That one tiny, invisible, intentional decision just diverted you from months, if not years, of unnecessary spiritual detours. So if things feel unusually calm lately, it's not a coincidence. It's not a setup. It's the fruit of that one choice. In this video, we're not just going to talk about what you did. We're going to expose why it worked, how it protected you, and what it's setting you up for next. Grab your tea, your journal, or whatever helps you stay grounded, because what you're about to hear is not surface-level advice. It's spiritual revelation wrapped in truth with just enough fire to set your timeline on holy autopilot. Let's dive in. Number 1. You removed access, not just people. You didn't just cut people off. You shut down the access points they were using to bring chaos into your life. And that's much deeper than just hitting the block button or ghosting someone. You made a spiritual decision whether you realized it or not. Because here's the truth. Some people weren't damaging your life through loud attacks. They were doing it through quiet access, through conversations that drained you, through little manipulations that made you question yourself, through subtle energy shifts that left you exhausted after every interaction. And the wild part is, it didn't even always look like toxicity. Sometimes it came in the form of just checking in, or just joking, or I didn't mean it like that. But over time, those moments added up, and your soul started noticing what your brain had been taught to normalize. What you did recently, maybe it was saying no to the invite. Maybe it was finally not replying to that text. Maybe it was choosing to take a different route, mentally, emotionally, or even physically. Whatever it was, it disrupted a pattern. And patterns are where spiritual warfare hides best. Not in the big, obvious stuff, but in the daily, repetitive loops that train you to keep doors open to people who no longer belong in your space. You didn't just remove them, you removed their influence. You took away the power they had to pull on your guilt, your empathy, or your fear of being misunderstood. And that decision was more than protection. It was deliverance. Quiet, unceremonious deliverance. The kind that doesn't get applause but shifts atmospheres. Now you're starting to notice the peace. You're not second-guessing your every move. You're not replaying conversations in your head all night. That silence you're experiencing? That's not loneliness. It's the sound of interference being cut off. It's the absence of emotional static. You're finally hearing your own thoughts without someone else's manipulation laced in them. That one boundary, that one shift, just sealed you off from a new wave of unnecessary nonsense. And the best part? You don't even need to explain it. They felt the access was denied. They felt the change. And now you're protected, not because you fought them, but because you finally stopped giving them the key. Number 2, you broke an invisible agreement you didn't know you signed. You did something powerful, and you may not have even realized it. You broke an invisible agreement you didn't know you signed. That sounds strange, but it's real. Sometimes we walk around carrying responsibilities, roles, and expectations that were never ours to begin with. Somewhere along the line, through trauma, manipulation, fear of abandonment, or the need to be accepted, we silently agreed to shrink, to please, to take the blame, to keep the peace, no matter the cost. We didn't sign a contract with a pen, but we signed it with our behavior. We signed it every time we stayed silent when we should have spoken up. Every time we took the hit just to avoid the argument. Every time we made ourselves smaller so someone else could feel more secure. But recently you shifted. You said no, or maybe you said nothing at all. But either way, you didn't do what they expected you to do. You didn't fall into the old rhythm. You didn't respond like the you they were used to manipulating. And that broke the cycle. Spiritually, that act tore up the unspoken agreement. And what's wild is, as soon as you did that, the energy shifted. You might have felt guilt at first, or a strange tension in the air. But what actually happened was spiritual freedom. You reclaimed your authority. You stood up, not in rage or revenge, but in quiet refusal to carry what never belonged to you. You'll notice something now. People may start to act confused, offended, or even aggressive. Not because you did something wrong, but because their access was tied to that old agreement. And without that access, they're powerless. They can't use guilt. They can't use shame. They can't control you through your kindness anymore. And they know it. You protected yourself from so much unnecessary drama, stress, and spiritual heaviness just by shifting that one response. That one moment of, "I'm not doing this anymore," echoed into the spiritual realm and realigned your path. Now, things that used to trap you won't even tempt you. Cycles that used to follow you have nothing to hold on to. You broke a contract that was draining you dry, and now you're about to walk in a peace that can't be stolen. Number 3, you finally rejected the bait of false responsibility. One of the most powerful things you've done recently, whether you fully realize it or not, is refusing to carry what isn't yours anymore. You stopped accepting the emotional baggage other people kept trying to throw at your feet. You stopped taking responsibility for everyone else's chaos, pain, immaturity, and poor choices. And that shift, it just saved you from a lifetime of unnecessary spiritual and emotional burnout. For so long, you may have felt like you had to be the one who held everything together. You were the fixer, the forgiver, the one who always gave another chance. And somewhere in all of that, you took on the false belief that it was your job to manage how others felt, how they reacted, and how they healed. But here's the truth. That was never your assignment. You were manipulated, sometimes subtly, sometimes directly, into feeling like if things fell apart, it would be your fault. That if someone acted out, it was because you didn't do enough. That if they failed, it was because you didn't support them enough. That lie became a burden, and that burden became a lifestyle. But recently, you dropped it. You didn't announce it, and you didn't argue about it. You just stopped engaging in the emotional chess games. You stopped picking up the guilt. You stopped explaining yourself to people who never listened anyway. And the moment you did, something major shifted around you. You probably felt lighter, less anxious, less drained. And that's not just mental, that's spiritual. Because that decision cut the energetic cords that kept looping you back into messes that had nothing to do with your soul's purpose. Here's what they don't want you to know. When you stop carrying false responsibility, people who were using your empathy as a leash will panic. They'll say you changed. They'll call you cold. But that's only because they lost their ability to control you with their dysfunction. The moment you said, "That's not mine to carry," you disarmed manipulation that was passed down through generations. You just protected your future by choosing to no longer be the emotional janitor in other people's broken houses. You're not cold. You're clean. You didn't abandon them. You finally stopped abandoning yourself. Number 4, you questioned their narrative, and that broke the spell. One of the most powerful shifts you've made recently was quiet, internal, and deeply spiritual. You questioned the version of yourself that was handed to you by people who benefited from your confusion. You stopped agreeing with the image they projected onto you. And the moment you did that, something broke, not just in your mind, but in the entire atmosphere around you. For a long time, you may have carried labels and identities that were never truly yours. You were told you were too sensitive, too much, too dramatic, too selfish, too angry, too emotional, whatever suited their control. And after hearing it so often, you started to believe it. You adjusted yourself. You dimmed. You apologized for simply being. But the truth is, those labels weren't descriptions. They were tools. Tools to shrink you. Tools to contain you. Tools to keep you second-guessing yourself so you'd stay manageable. But something recently clicked inside you. It could have been a conversation, a moment of silence, or a deep inner knowing that hit you out of nowhere. You started asking, wait, what if they were wrong about me? That one question shook everything, because now you're no longer operating under the spell of their manipulation. The guilt no longer sticks. The shame doesn't bite the way it used to. The confusion they thrived on is starting to clear up. You're finally seeing yourself with your own eyes instead of theirs. That mental rebellion might not look big on the outside, but it's a spiritual revolution. When you stop believing their story about you, you rip the mask off the game they've been playing. You didn't need to argue with them. You didn't need to confront them. The power was never in their words. It was in your agreement with them. And now that you've taken your agreement back, the illusion is collapsing. This shift just saved you from future relationships, environments, and situations that would have tried to use that old version of you as an entry point. You're no longer manipulatable in the way you once were. You're not just healing, you're reclaiming your identity. And that is dangerous to anyone who depended on your confusion to feel powerful. Number 5, you walked away without needing closure. You walked away without needing closure. And that was one of the most spiritually mature things you've ever done. Because let's be real, closure is one of the most overrated and misunderstood concepts out there. People talk about it like it's some magical moment where everything makes sense, and everyone finally admits what they did wrong. But most of the time, closure is just an excuse to stay connected to the very thing that's draining you. It's a spiritual delay tactic, not a healing requirement. You choosing to walk away without waiting for an apology, an explanation, or a final conversation wasn't weakness. It was power. It meant you finally understood that some people will never give you the truth because they were never committed to it in the first place. They weren't confused. They weren't unaware. They were simply comfortable with how things were because the chaos worked in their favor. And you, walking away without demanding clarity, that broke the karmic loop. That ended the energetic contract. You didn't just protect your peace. You escaped a repeating cycle that would have followed you into your next season. Because when you chase closure from the wrong people, you're actually chasing validation. You're trying to get truth from someone who built their whole relationship with you on distortion. They wanted you stuck. They wanted you rereading old messages, overthinking every detail, and waiting for them to become someone they never were. But when you chose peace instead of the performance of healing, you shattered the game. You no longer needed them to give you the final word because you realized your decision was the final word. And now you're free. Not perfect, not untouched, but free. Free from the emotional hooks they tried to leave in you. Free from the idea that healing has to be mutual. Free from the belief that walking away quietly means you didn't care. You cared, but you cared more about your soul than their version of closure. That choice just rerouted your destiny. You didn't just leave a person, a place, or a situation. You left a cycle. And in doing so, you cleared space for peace to become permanent. because this time you chose it before it was offered. Number 6. You decided to keep what you know to yourself. You made a decision recently that might have looked small on the outside, but spiritually it was massive. You decided to keep what you know to yourself, and that wasn't just about silence, it was about self-preservation. You stopped trying to explain your heart, your purpose, your healing, and your growth to people who were never interested in understanding you to begin with. And by doing that, you just shielded yourself from a whole wave of unnecessary spiritual interference. The truth is, some people don't want clarity. They want control. They want access to your thoughts so they can twist them, challenge them, diminish them, and use them against you. They don't ask because they care. They ask so they can find new ways to stay one step ahead of your growth. And for a long time you might have felt obligated to give answers, to over-explain, to prove that your heart was pure, to walk them through your process in hopes they'd finally get it. But recently, something in you shifted. You stopped handing out the blueprint. That's major. Because the wisdom inside you, it's not just information, it's spiritual technology. It's your divine strategy, shaped by every battle you've survived and every revelation you've earned. It's sacred, and it's not meant to be broadcast to those who are secretly hoping to sabotage the very path they're pretending to support. By choosing silence, you just placed a force field around your next level. You stopped giving saboteurs the instruction manual. You stopped letting critics into the sacred lab of your evolution. Now, they're confused, and that's exactly how it's supposed to be. Confusion disarms the enemy, and silence is your power tool. You didn't lose your voice, you just chose to use it where it counts. You didn't go quiet out of fear, you went quiet out of wisdom. There's strength in not reacting, power in not explaining, safety in not announcing. You're not hiding, you're incubating, protecting your downloads, holding space for your own clarity before offering it to a crowd that only shows up to dissect, not to understand. That choice just preserved your peace, your plans, and your purpose. And now you're moving in stealth, where divine timing speaks louder than explanations ever could. Number 7. You refuse to prove your innocence to the guilty. You made one of the boldest and most spiritually mature decisions a person can make. You refused to prove your innocence to the guilty. You didn't plead your case. You didn't beg to be understood. You didn't try to convince the very people who already knew the truth, but chose to lie anyway. And that decision? It didn't just protect your energy, it activated divine justice. There comes a point when you realize that defending yourself to liars is like pouring water into a bucket with holes. It will never be enough, because they were never interested in the truth. They were interested in control. Their lies weren't about you. They were about power, spinning narratives to make themselves look like the victim, painting you as the problem so they could avoid accountability. They didn't misunderstand you, they misused you. And when you chose silence over self-defense, you took their weapon away. Because here's the truth. Liars need your reaction to keep their story alive. They need your outrage, your panic, your desperation to clear your name. But you gave them none of that. You let the false narrative breathe its own poisoned air, and that was strategic, that was divine, that was war in the spirit. By not chasing their version of the story, you flipped the script. You stopped running after justice, and now justice is coming for them. The very lies they used to build a platform will become the cracks in their foundation. And the best part, you don't have to expose them. You don't have to prove anything. Life is already setting up the evidence. People are watching. Energies are shifting. And sooner than they expect, the truth will come out. Not because you screamed it, but because God never lets the innocent carry the weight of guilt forever. You just avoided months, maybe years of emotional exhaustion trying to win over people who were never rooting for you in the first place. You protected your soul from being dragged into a courtroom of public opinion, where the judge was already bought. You didn't let them win. You let them rot in their own lies, and when the fallout comes, you'll be so far ahead, so healed, so covered, you won't even flinch. Number 8. You declined the invitation to perform your old self. You were tested recently, and most people would have missed it. It wasn't loud. It didn't come with flashing signs or open conflict. It came as a familiar energy, a familiar tone, a familiar situation designed to pull you back into an old version of yourself. Maybe it was someone pushing your buttons in a way they used to. Maybe it was a disrespectful comment that used to get a reaction. Maybe it was a subtle power play from someone who used to thrive off your silence, your people-pleasing, or your fear. But this time, you did not perform. You did not react. You did not revert. You declined the unspoken invitation to return to a version of yourself you have outgrown, and that was powerful, because when you used to respond, when you used to shrink or explode or explain, you were unknowingly feeding a pattern that kept you tied to an outdated identity. That identity wasn't just emotional, it was spiritual. And that pattern was a doorway, a loop, a magnet that kept attracting the same kind of chaos again and again. But your refusal changed everything. That one moment of restraint or detachment or silence wasn't weakness. It was transformation in real time. You just sealed a new timeline. You just walked into a version of your life where you are no longer available for the roles you used to play in other people's dysfunction. They tried to bait you into being the person they could manipulate, dismiss, provoke, or control. And when you didn't respond the way they expected, you short-circuited their strategy. This wasn't just about maturity, it was about spiritual evolution, because what you said no to was not just a situation, it was a reality, a timeline full of repeated disappointment, stuck energy, and emotional regression. By staying rooted in your growth, you blocked a future that was already trying to form around the old you. They were subconsciously begging for that version to come back. But you knew better. You felt the shift. And you honored it. You didn't need to prove that you had changed. You simply showed it. And that quiet resistance was louder than any performance you could have given. You are no longer available for who you used to be, and that decision just rewrote your future. Number 9. You made a quiet internal decision that shifted your fate. There was no spotlight, no dramatic breakdown, no emotional speech, just a quiet, deeply personal moment when something inside you said, "I'm done settling." And while nobody else may have noticed it, everything changed from that point forward. You didn't scream it. You didn't post about it. You didn't even feel the need to tell anyone. But that internal shift, the one where you decided that the bare minimum would no longer cut it, sent out a signal so strong that the spiritual realm had to respond. People underestimate what happens when you reach that place. It's not a moment of rage. It's not a tantrum. It's clarity. Pure, solid, grounded clarity. A decision rooted in self-respect. And that type of clarity is a form of authority. It speaks louder than begging ever could. It tells the universe, I finally see myself. And once that decision is made, your entire energetic field begins to shift. People who once took advantage of your kindness start feeling blocked. Environments that once felt tolerable begin to irritate your spirit. Doors you used to force open no longer appeal to you. That's not a mood swing, it's alignment. And now reality has no choice but to catch up to your decision. That moment was a declaration, a boundary, a spiritual update, and whether it was about love, your purpose, your self-worth, or your time, you drew a line, and the line was final. That's why you're feeling things shake up around you. Some relationships may be fading. Certain opportunities may be slowing down. Don't panic. That's the old world trying to exit because it no longer fits who you are becoming. That one silent decision was more powerful than any dramatic exit. You didn't settle this time. You didn't compromise to avoid discomfort. You didn't beg for crumbs. and that refusal echoed in the spirit. Now everything around you must rise to meet your new standard or fall away. You're not being punished. You're being repositioned. Because once your soul made that choice, anything that doesn't match it became expired. This wasn't just a mindset shift. It was a fate shift, a quiet revolution that changed your direction without needing permission. And from this point forward, life will respond to that version of you, the one who finally knows what they deserve. Number 10. You finally saw the pattern and stepped out of it. You saw it. Maybe not all at once, but clear enough to recognize it was no longer random. The same type of situation, the same kind of people, the same emotional drain, just in a different outfit. It kept showing up. Different faces, different names, but always leading you to the same dead end. And this time, instead of blaming yourself or making excuses for others, you finally connected the dots. You recognized the pattern, and more importantly, you stepped out of it. That right there is spiritual intelligence in action, because most people never make it to that level of awareness. They stay stuck thinking, why does this always happen to me? But you paused, you studied the energy, you realized it wasn't a coincidence, it was a cycle. And it wasn't just personal, it was generational. Something passed down, a behavior, a belief, a response mechanism, something you absorbed through survival, not choice. And instead of repeating it again, you chose to stop. That moment of awareness didn't just change your path, it protected your future. Because patterns don't just drain your joy, they delay your purpose. They keep you tied to outdated roles, unnecessary suffering, and spiritual loops that never lead to freedom. By refusing to play along this time, you broke an agreement with dysfunction. You interrupted a cycle that your bloodline might have been stuck in for decades or longer. And the wild part, all it took was one decision. One conscious refusal to say, not again. You didn't yell, you didn't make a scene, you just stepped back. You stopped arguing with people who live in chaos. You stopped accepting emotional crumbs and calling it connection. You stopped trying to prove your worth to people who benefit from your self-doubt. And by doing that, you didn't just save yourself, you saved whoever comes after you, your future kids, your lineage, your next version. All because you had the courage to see the game and walk away from it. That pattern thought it had you locked in for life. But your awareness just became your exit. You didn't need a sign from the sky. You needed a shift in your spirit. And now that you've made it, you've done something that generations before you couldn't. You didn't just heal, you intercepted inherited disaster. Number 11. You sat with the pain instead of escaping it. You could have run. You had every excuse to escape, distract, suppress, or pretend like it didn't hurt. But you didn't. You sat with the pain, and that decision alone changed your entire path. Not because you liked the suffering, but because you finally understood something that takes most people a lifetime to realize. Avoidance might bring short-term relief, but it guarantees long-term cycles. You were done repeating. Most people try to numb their way through pain. They chase relationships, stay busy, overwork, overthink, overeat, overtalk. Anything but sit in the stillness and feel the weight of what's really going on inside. But you did the opposite. You chose presence. You allowed the ache to be felt, the grief to surface, the anger to speak. You allowed the discomfort to stretch you instead of letting it destroy you. And that made you dangerous in the spirit realm. Sitting with the pain taught you what nothing else could. It stripped away your illusions. It revealed who was really there for you. It showed you how much of your identity was built on survival, and how much more is waiting for you once healing begins. You didn't just survive the fire, you let the fire purify you. And that choice elevated your spiritual rank in ways you don't even fully understand yet. But here's the beauty of it. By choosing to process instead of avoid, you created protection for your future. Because now, You can recognize emotional traps dressed up as blessings. You're not easily lured in by flattery, chaos, or trauma bonding anymore. You can spot when something feels familiar, but wrong. That discernment came at a cost, and you paid it in full with your tears, your silence, your nights of wrestling with emotions most people run from. You've grown in ways that aren't visible on the outside. Your discernment is sharper. Your intuition is louder. Your tolerance for anything fake or misaligned is gone. That is not a small thing. That is spiritual armor. And the pain that once threatened to break you has now become the very thing that built your discernment. You didn't just sit with the pain. You allowed it to teach you. And because of that, you will never be tricked by the same lesson twice. Number 12. You chose discipline over temporary comfort. You made a decision that many people avoid their whole lives. You chose discipline over temporary comfort. And it may not have looked impressive on the outside. There were no lights, no applause, no instant results. But in the spirit, it was a game changer. Because that one moment where you said, "Not yet," or "This is not for me," or "I'll wait," was more than just willpower. It was protection. You didn't just resist something, you blocked a counterfeit. There was something that looked good. It might have offered quick relief, fast money, easy validation, or emotional attention when you were feeling empty. But deep down, you knew it wasn't aligned. It came too quickly. It came with strings. It came wrapped in urgency and coated with confusion. And instead of giving in, you paused. You resisted the itch to fix your discomfort with something temporary. That pause saved you. Most people don't understand how discipline works in the spirit. They think it's just about saying no to bad things. But real discipline is saying no to almost right things, to good-looking but wrong-timing things, to emotionally tempting but spiritually costly things. And what you did was rare. You chose to wait for alignment instead of settling for attachment. That decision just closed a door the enemy was hoping you'd walk through. Because if you had taken that shortcut, that quick fix, that emotionally messy option, you would have been tied to something you'd later need God to rescue you from. You didn't just say no to the wrong thing. You made space for the real thing, for the one that won't cost you your peace, the one that won't drain your energy, the one that's built on truth, not temptation. Discipline may feel like lack in the moment, but it's spiritual foresight. It says, "I would rather be temporarily uncomfortable than permanently out of alignment." That's growth, that's maturity, and that's why your future is about to look very different. You broke the cycle of self-sabotage. You turned down something that would have felt good for a moment but cost you deeply later. And now, you are not only protected, you're positioned. Positioned for something real, lasting, and fully yours. All because you had the strength to wait. Number 13, you prayed differently, not for blessings, but for clarity. Something shifted in your prayer life recently, and it changed more than you think. You stopped praying the way you used to. You weren't asking for more money, more friends, more opportunities, or even more peace. This time, you asked for clarity. Not because you were desperate, but because you finally realized that what you see determines what you choose. And when you started asking for vision instead of provision, everything began to rearrange itself around that request. This kind of prayer is different. It doesn't always come with goosebumps or fireworks. It doesn't always make you feel good in the moment. Sometimes it makes you uncomfortable because clarity exposes, it removes illusions. It shows you who is really with you and who is just clapping for your failure in slow motion. It reveals the real reason why certain doors keep closing, why some people suddenly distance themselves, and why something you thought was a blessing was actually bait. But that discomfort, that's protection. Because clarity doesn't just help you avoid trouble, It helps you avoid being tricked into walking straight into it. When you ask God to show you what's real instead of just giving you what you want, you activated a deeper form of spiritual security. You stopped inviting confusion into your life dressed up as connection. You stopped chasing signs and started demanding insight. And that one adjustment reprogrammed your entire divine defense system. The beauty of this kind of clarity is that it starts working before danger even shows up. You start seeing things before they form. You sense energy shifts before people speak. You lose interest in things that haven't even revealed themselves to be false yet. That's not paranoia. That's divine vision doing its job. This is why some things have recently fallen apart without warning. Why some people have gone quiet. Why you've felt more isolated, but somehow more at peace. That's clarity. It prunes before it rewards. It disrupts before it protects. And you're not losing. It's just that what you asked for is working. You didn't pray wrong before, but now you're praying with precision. You're not just looking for blessings. You're building filters. And because of that, you won't be fooled, tricked, or delayed by anything that doesn't belong in your next chapter. Number 14. You let them go without sending a warning shot. You let them go without a show, without a warning, and without needing to be seen. You didn't slam the door. You didn't air out their secrets. You didn't write the long message explaining every reason why you were done. You just left, quietly, cleanly. And that decision right there was spiritual mastery. Because your silence wasn't passive, it was intentional. It was protection. It was power. Most people don't realize this, but some enemies don't want to fight you. They want to feed off you. Your reactions, your explanations, your energy, those were their fuel. The longer you engaged, the longer they could keep you tethered to chaos. They would trigger you, wait for you to snap, then play the victim when you defended yourself. That was the trap. A never-ending cycle of bait and backlash, confusion and cleanup, insult and explanation. But you outgrew it. You realized something sacred. Freedom doesn't need permission or an audience. You saw what it was, and instead of yelling, you disconnected. Instead of proving the truth, you embodied it. And the moment you stopped performing for people who were never listening anyway, your energy started healing. The silence that followed your exit wasn't emptiness, it was insulation. Spiritual insulation. You denied them what they came for. You robbed them of the reaction they needed to keep the story spinning. And now they're talking, they're wondering, they're scrambling. Because what they thought would hurt you couldn't even reach you. The drama they tried to provoke fell flat because you refused to dance to their tune. That silence became a sword, cutting the cord between you and every narrative they were trying to build around your name. You protected yourself by doing what many can't, walking away when your ego wanted to respond. You chose dignity over drama, stillness over spectacle, and because of that you just shut down an entire cycle of spiritual warfare. You didn't just leave a situation, you unplugged from a system. Letting go without warning wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. You moved like someone who finally understands their value. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. And the silence you left behind, that's the echo of someone who finally knows they owe nothing to chaos, not even a goodbye. What you did may not have looked like a big, life-changing moment to the outside world, but spiritually, it was a seismic shift. Each quiet decision, each boundary honored, each temptation resisted, wasn't just about survival, it was about alignment. You didn't scream, you didn't demand credit, you just moved differently. And that shift didn't go unnoticed in the spirit realm. While others are still stuck in karmic loops, repeating the same dramas in different costumes, you disrupted the cycle. You cut the wires they used to trigger you. You disconnected from false narratives, declined emotional bait, and chose clarity over chaos. That wasn't luck. That was power. Quiet, grounded, divine power. You protected your future by adjusting your present. That's why certain people are confused, certain patterns didn't repeat, and certain doors shut without warning. You've been spiritually insulated not because you fought harder, but because you moved smarter. You walked in wisdom. You refused to be manipulated into providing free energy to systems designed to drain you. This is your confirmation. The storm you avoided was real. The danger you didn't see was on its way. But your recent choices rerouted your destiny. You just passed a major spiritual test, and now everything must respond to your new frequency, people, places, and even time itself. So keep moving in silence when needed. Keep choosing vision over validation. And remember, it wasn't what you shouted that protected you. It was what you finally refused to entertain. Your growth is your guard now. If this message lit something up in your spirit, don't just sit with it. Let it move you. Hit that like button to show you're walking in a new frequency. Drop a comment below and let us know which part hit you the hardest. Your story could be the confirmation someone else is praying for. Share this video with your tribe, your friends, or that one person who keeps asking why they feel different lately. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications, because this isn't just a platform, it's a spiritual hub. Every video is crafted to awaken, align, and activate you for the path ahead. If you're ready for more revelations, divine downloads, and content that cuts straight through the noise, this is where you belong. You're not here by accident. You're here because something in your soul is ready to evolve. Let's walk this journey together. God bless you.